Hello and welcome to Political Update. I'm Paul Lisnek. Well, you know, as you sort of travel around the city on a daily basis, do you ever wonder, did somebody sort of plan this city, plan how I'm supposed to get from place to place and what's going on in the future? Or is this sort of a happenstance sort of a thing? The answer is there's a lot of planning that goes into it. In fact, more than you might realize. In fact, far ahead of time than you might realize. We're going to step into the world of 2040 today, and let me introduce my guest who's going to help us do that, and that is Randy Blankenhorn, who is the Executive Director of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. We can call it CMAP, right, Randy?
That's correct, Paul.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I've teased it in, but tell us a little bit why are we looking at 2040 in the work that you do?
Well, we have to look that far out as we look at how we make investments and the time that it takes to really make change. We look at how we can...
When you say investments, are you talking about money to be raised?
I'm talking about money. I'm talking about transportation investments. I'm talking about investments in water and sewer, investments in our schools. How we plan that can't be planned in a 3 or 4 year period. You really have to
Couldn't tell that from the way we usually operate here at Springfield.
There is some truth, and I think that's a good example of why we need to do this planning farther out.
Okay. Now, actually, CMAP is sort of a newer agency, right? You consisted of a couple of different agencies. What's the history?
Correct. We were created in 2005 as a result of a merger of what was the Northeastern Illinois Planning Commission, which did land use and comprehensive planning.
People call that NIPSI.
NIPSI, yeah. And the Chicago Area Transportation Study, or CATS, which did the transportation planning. And our local officials, our business leaders, and our civic community said, that doesn't make sense anymore. We need to plan together. You can't plan transportation differently from land use or the environment. And so the General Assembly created this agency in the spring of 2005.
I would have called it NIPSI Cats, but it's a long name. Well, and so what you're saying is there was transportation, there was environment, we combined them. So let's sort of get into exactly what it is CMAP is looking at. First of all, the area you're dealing with is Northeast Illinois.
Our area is the 7 counties of Northeastern Illinois. It's our traditional of Kane and Lake and Cook and McHenry and DuPage and Will, but also Kendall County, which you might have seen is now the fastest growing county in the country.
Yeah, 8 million people in this area overall.
Right.
And is there another agency that deals with, you know, the southern part and other areas, or is this just the place we're concerned about in this state?
Well, no, there are similar agencies across the state. This is by far the biggest, but it is...
And most of our viewing area, so it makes a lot of sense.
But most of your bigger areas have something that looks like this.
Okay. Now, and by the way, some people might raise the question, so you're looking at 2040, but here we are, 2008. Was there some plan that we're guiding now that was also done about 30 or 40 years ago?
Sure. This is, both CATS and NIPSI, our predecessor agencies, had plans through other periods, and in fact are done every 4 to 5 years, updated, and really looked at where we are and where we needed to be then. So we're operating under existing plans, and these are generally just updates. What we're doing in this 2040 plan is a clean slate, talking about where we really want to be as a region.
As though we had nothing available now, what do we want to do?
Right. I think we want to, you know, there are things in progress that are never going to stop, projects that are underway, things that are happening, but we really want to say, okay, from today, what do we want this region to look like in 2040? Okay. What do we want? And
let's share some of that. And by the way, the great part of this is, we'll talk about it, the public actually gets to participate in this.
Absolutely. It's not just gets to participate, we need them to participate. We're trying new things, you know, and traditionally public hearings done by government and semi-government agencies, you get the same 12 people that show up every time.
They go to every meeting.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're involving the internet and that kind of thing. We're going to get to that, but first let's sort of talk about what it is CMAP is looking at. Let's start with the transportation end of things. Obviously, you know, trains, automobiles, and all of that. Give us a sort of the long-range view of transportation as you currently see it.
Well, I think as we look at transportation and we talk about being the 2nd or 3rd most congested region in the country, we're looking at options. We're looking at how we move people differently. If we're going to add 2.8 million people in this region by 2040, how are they going to move around? How are we going to get people through to jobs, to
I know
work?
The answer, Randy. They're going to get cars and they're going on the Dan Ryan. That's what they're going to do. They're going on the highway.
And I think that's always going to be the case. And we need to make strategic highway investments. But we also need to have transit investments that really give people an alternative. Not that they're going to take it for every trip, but that they have the option to take transit when it makes sense for them.
So do you interact with, say, Ron Huberman of the CTA and, you know, these folks who say, look, your trains, which hardly work now, I mean, with all due respect, we're trying to improve those, but, you know, this can't be in 2040.
We do work with those agencies. Those agencies implement the plans that we create. And I think that's a key. We have to be working with them all the time. You know, and part of our job is to worry about things farther out than they can. Ron's got problems today that he's doing a nice job dealing with, but we got to think longer term.
And all of this triggers money.
Absolutely.
So before we even go on to anything else, you can almost stop and go, wait a minute, transportation alone, it costs more money than we can fathom. So how does that enter into the picture for you?
Well,
you're not worried about budgets, you're just worried about what 2040 should look like.
No, we are worried about budgets. I think the difference in this plan than in other plans is that it's going to talk very much about how we implement it. It's not just a plan up here at 30,000 feet and it wins awards and nobody ever reads it.
It's the Jetsons, right?
Exactly.
Let's just live like that.
It's really how do we get to where we want to be, and that is talking about the money. Our feeling is that if we make the right case, if we have the right plans, that we'll be able to find the money, that people will understand that investing in transportation is just that. It's an investment.
Are you charged with the responsibility of finding money, or is that something that we'll just go back to the legislature, guys, we need $80 billion, figure it out?
In our legislation, it calls for us to create a financial plan for transportation. Okay. So yes, we are charged with that.
And in terms of the creativity of that, I mean, how far do you get to say, we need another lottery? We need, are you, no holds barred?
I think it is a no holds barred. I think that's the conversation we want to have with people, is what makes sense. What are our residents willing to pay for? How are they willing to pay for it? What makes sense, not today necessarily, but over that 20 or 30-year period of how we raise that kind of revenue.
So ultimately, when you're done, your sense is, look, we now know the money we believe we're going to need. Let's start worrying about it in 2008 and move forward with it.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of the other part of